Welcome to Lesson 18 for Hebrew 1 and 2, Bright OT 502-504. You may be wondering to yourself, wait a minute, I thought this was Bright Old Testament 500. Well, apparently, according to our school's academic catalog, that is not the case. This is Bright OT 502 and 504, which is how I'll be referring to it for the rest of the semester. Even though it really doesn't matter, it's still Hebrew 1 and 2. But at least we're being consistent. Today we're going to be covering the Pual stem, which of all the Hebrew stems is the easiest, even easier than the Hithpael, and you'll see why as we move forward. The Pual is simply the passive form of the Piel. In Katal form, it is Ku-Tal, with a kibbutz under the first root letter, again a dagesh in the second root letter, just as in the Piel, and instead of a sereh, there is a patak under the second root letter, hence Pual. Here is the complete Pual strong perfect paradigm. As you can see, it is very similar to the Pual perfect paradigm. The only difference being that instead of a hirik, we have a kibbutz. We still have that dagesh in the second root letter, and instead of an sereh as in P-al, we have a patak as in Pual. This is the Pual strong imperfect. As you can see, we still have similar diagnostics, and that is a schwa underneath the preformative, followed by the stem letter, which in the PL is a patak. So anytime we see a vocal schwa followed by a patak at the beginning of a word, we know that it is a PL. Here in the Pual, we have the same sort of situation, except that it is a vocal schwa followed by a kibbutz, which is always an indication that this is a Pual. We still have the dagesh forte in the second root letter, and we still have our A-class patak underneath that second root letter. This is the Pual Imperative. As you can see, there is nothing here. That's because the Pual does not occur in the imperative in the Old Testament, which is nice for our purposes. If there were an imperative, we would probably form it the same way as the PL imperative, simply removing the preformative. But since there is no occurrence of this in the scriptures, we're simply not going to worry about it. Yet another reason why the Pual is so simple. Here is the Pual Infinitive, both the infinitive construct and the infinitive absolute. And again, the Pual does not occur in the Old Testament in either form. I know you were getting excited thinking we were going for the trifecta of no participles either, but there is a participle in the Pual. There is not a passive participle in the Pual because the Pual is passive. There's no passive participle in the PL because the Pual is the passive participle of the PL. So there is only an active form, so-called active form, or a strong absolute form in each of the PL and the Pual, with the Pual acting as that passive. So even though this is not a passive participle, but an active participle, we would still translate it passively because that's what we do with the Pual. Here you can see, again, we have that mem prefix with a vocal schwa that tells us we are either in the PL or the Pual. In the PL, it's followed by a patak. In the Pual, it's followed by a kibbutz, still with that second root letter dagesh and the patak. Here is the entire Pual paradigm. Again, only 3 forms occurring in the Old Testament. As always, we have our weak roots to contend with. The third aleph verbs do not take a patak like the rest of the Pual. Instead, because of the presence of that guttural, they will take a kametz. They will still, however, take a kibbutz under the first root letter and a dagesh in the second root letter. Third hey verbs continue to do their own thing as they typically do, so that we always have a kametz hey in a perfect regardless of stem, a segol hey in the imperfect regardless of stem, and a segol hey in the participle regardless of stem. We've simply changed the stem so that we have a kibbutz under the first root letter, in the imperfect again that vocal schwa, and the mem in the participle, and always a dagesh in the second root letter. The perfect 2ms looks very similar to the PL perfect 2ms, except again, instead of a hirik under the first root letter, we have a kibbutz. We also have a Say-Ray yod here in the Pual instead of the Hirik yod in the Pual, but really at this point that doesn't really matter because the kibitz is such a dead giveaway that this is a Pual Perfect. Again, as a repetition, here are the third hay diagnostics. Keeping in mind you are going to see this chart in every single stem we cover. Perfect always ends in comets hay. Imperfect always ends in segol hay. Imperative always ends in Say-Ray hay. Infinitive construct always ends in holum vav tav. And the participle always ends in segol hay. Those roots that have a guttural in the second root letter occasionally cause problems in the Pual stem because they will not accept a dagesh forte in that second root guttural letter. Instead, the letter will be implicitly doubled, meaning that the dagesh forte is not written but it is assumed to be doubled. Or, in other cases, there will be compensatory lengthening, where the previous vowel will lengthen to a long vowel so as to be able to stand in an open, unaccented syllable. In the PL, this occasionally meant the lengthening of a Hirik to a Say-Ray in the Perfect, and a Patak to a Comets in all other forms. However, in the Pual, the first letter is not a Hirik or a Patak, but a Kibitz, which is a short U class vowel. Rather than lengthening all the way to a Shurik, which is a unchangeably long vowel, the Kibitz will simply lengthen to a long O, meaning a holum over the first root letter. This could create a problem, at least in the Perfect, because it looks very similar to the form of the Cal active participle, co-tail. Of course, you will notice that under the second root letter, we still have a patak in the Pual, because this is pu-al rather than co-tail, but occasionally these two could be mixed up, so we'll have to be careful. Well, there you have it. We have the entire Pual paradigm of strong and weak verbs. Again, very easy. Perhaps the only thing that needs to be watched out for is that perfect verb in the second guttural, because it might be mixed up with a cal strong participle. However, again, that patak under the second root letter lets us know that we're not dealing with a coattail, but a poal. Well, I certainly hope that you found all this as easy as I did. Make sure that you use the Quizlets to double check your understanding, learn your vocab, and I will see you in class.